I'm standing at the edge of another abandoned farm, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The air smells like wet soil and decaying vegetation, the remnants of last year's failed harvest. This isn't just about finding a place to grow food. It's about finding a place that won't kill me. And that means I need to be methodical. No gut feelings, no guesswork. Just facts, observations, and cold, hard calculations. First, the soil. Everything starts here. Without viable soil, nothing else matters. I crouch down and dig my fingers into the earth, feeling the texture. Sandy, clay-heavy, loamy. The ideal is a sandy loam, 40% sand, 40% silt, 20% clay. That's the sweet spot for drainage, aeration, and nutrient retention. Too much clay, and the roots suffocate. Too much sand, and the water drains too fast, taking nutrients with it. I grab a handful and squeeze it. If it holds its shape but crumbles when I poke it, that's good. If it stays in a tight ball, it's too dense. If it falls apart immediately, it's too loose. I need at least 6 inches of topsoil. Less than that, and I'm looking at years of amending before it's productive. I dig a small hole with my knife, examining the layers. The topsoil is dark, which is a good sign, high in organic matter. But I need to confirm. I'll do a jar test later. Fill a clear jar with soil and water, shake it, and let it settle. Sand settles first, then silt, then clay. The proportions will tell me what I'm working with. pH is next. Most crops prefer a range between 6.0 and 7.0. I don't have a lab, but I can improvise. A handful of vinegar and a baking soda will do. If the soil fizzes when I add vinegar, it's alkaline. If it fizzes when I add baking soda, it's acidic. No reaction means it's neutral. I'll need to adjust if it's outside the ideal range. Lime for acidic soil, sulfur for alkaline. But I won't know until I test it. Drainage is critical. I dig a hole about a foot deep and fill it with water. If it drains within an hour, the soil is well drained. If it takes longer, I've got a problem. Poor drainage leads to root rot, and root rot leads to dead plants. I've seen it before. Entire fields lost because the water couldn't escape. There are nettles and dockweed growing near the fence. Indicator plants. They thrive in nitrogen-rich soil, which is a good sign. But I'm not taking it on faith. I'll plant a test crop, radishes. They germinate quickly and are sensitive to poor conditions. If they sprout straight and healthy, the soil is viable. If they're stunted or deformed, I'm looking at nutrient deficiencies or contamination. And if they don't sprout at all, I'm walking away. I also need to check for compaction. I push a metal rod into the ground. If it goes in easily, the soil is loose. If it resists, it's compacted. Compacted soil means poor root penetration, poor water infiltration, and poor yields. I'll need to till it or use cover crops to break it up. And then there's the matter of contaminants. Industrial farms are notorious for pesticide and herbicide residue. Heavy metals are another concern, especially if this land was near a factory or a highway. I don't have a lab to test for that, but I can look for signs. Stunted plants, discolored leaves, or an unusual lack of wildlife. If the soil is poisoned, it's not worth the risk. The river is the most obvious water source. It's flowing, which means it's not stagnant, but that doesn't mean it's safe. Rivers can carry all kinds of contaminants. Agricultural runoff, industrial waste, sewage. I'll need to test it. The easiest way is to look for aquatic life. If there are fish, frogs, or insects, the water is probably clean. If not, I'll have to assume it's contaminated. I follow the riverbank looking for high water marks on the trees. This river floods. Not every year, but enough to be a concern. Flooding doesn't just bring water, it brings sediment, debris, and whatever else is upstream. I'll need to plant at least 50 feet from the bank to avoid the worst of it. and I'll need to build swales, shallow trenches, to divert excess water away from the crops. The pond is more promising. It's spring-fed, judging by the steady water level and lack of algae. Spring-fed means it's replenished from underground, which reduces the risk of contamination. But I'm not taking any chances. I'll boil any water I drink and use a sand and charcoal filter to remove impurities. For irrigation, I can use the pond water directly, but I'll need to monitor the plants for signs of stress. If they start yellowing or wilting, I'll know something is wrong. I also need to consider the risk of drought. Michigan gets 30 to 35 inches of rain annually, but it's not evenly distributed. Summer droughts are common, and if I'm relying on rain alone, I'm setting myself up for failure. I'll set up rain barrels to collect water from the roof of the farmhouse. A 50-gallon barrel can provide enough water for a small garden for a week. I'll also dig a small reservoir to store extra water during the wet season. Every drop counts. Gray water is another option. Water from washing dishes, bathing, or laundry can be reused for irrigation, as long as I avoid harsh soaps and detergents. I'll set up a simple filtration system, gravel, sand, and charcoal to remove any contaminants before it goes on to the crops. But water isn't just about quantity, it's about timing. Too much water at the wrong time can be just as deadly as too little. I'll need to monitor the weather and adjust my irrigation accordingly. And I'll need a backup plan. If the river dries up or the pond goes stagnant, I need to know where my next water source is coming from. This land isn't just a farm, it's a fortress, or it needs to be. The first thing I look for is visibility. The ridge to the east gives me a clear line of sight for 200 yards. That's good. I can see anyone coming long before they get here. The tree line is dense, but not too dense. I can thin it out to create sight lines and kill zones. If someone's coming, I want to see them before they see me. The farmhouse is a liability. Too many windows, too many doors. It's a death trap. But the root cellar is solid. Thick walls, single entrance. I can reinforce it with scavenged metal and sandbags. It's not impenetrable, but it's defensible. And it's underground, which means it's cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter.
Perimeter security is next. I'll start with a fence. Nothing fancy, just something to slow people down. Barbed wire if I can find it, or thorny plants like blackberries or roses. Natural barriers are better than nothing. I'll also set up early warning systems, tripwires, cans on a string, anything that makes noise when someone's approaching. Low tech, but effective. Wildlife is another concern. Deer, raccoons, feral dogs, they're all after the same thing I am, food. A fence will keep out the smaller animals, but deer can jump over anything less than 8 feet tall. I'll need to rotate guard shifts at night. And I'll need a dog. A good farm dog can alert me to intruders, human or otherwise. It's an extra mouth to feed, but it's worth it. I also need to think about escape routes. If the farm is overrun, I need a way out. A clear path through the woods to the north. Mark it with subtle signs only I can see. And I'll keep a bug-out bag packed and ready. Food, water, first aid, and a weapon. If I have to leave in a hurry, I want to be prepared. Defense isn't just about keeping people out. It's about blending in. I'll avoid large, obvious gardens. Instead, I'll use raised beds and interplant crops with wild plants. If someone's scanning the area from a distance, I don't want them to see a neat, orderly farm. I want them to see weeds and brush. The old farm equipment is useless now, but the metal is still valuable. The tractor frame can be repurposed into a tool rack or a support for a solar cell. The irrigation pipes can be cleaned and reused for drip irrigation. The barn wood is salvageable, good for raised beds or reinforcing structures. I'll inventory everything. Waste is a luxury I can't afford. The fields are exhausted. Years of monoculture farming have stripped the soil of nutrients. I'll start with cover crops, clover or vetch, to fix nitrogen and prevent erosion. Then I'll rotate in staple crops, potatoes, beans, squash. I'll avoid the center of the fields where the soil is worst and focus on the edges where the topsoil is deeper. I'll also need to scavenge for tools, hoes, rakes, shovels, anything I can find. I'll sharpen the blades, reinforce the handles, and keep them in good repair. A broken tool at the wrong time can mean the difference between a harvest and a failed crop. The farmhouse itself is a mixed blessing. The roof is intact, which means I can collect rainwater. The walls are solid, which means I can reinforce them. But the windows are a problem. I'll board them up, leaving only a few small openings for light and ventilation. And I'll install shutters I can close at night. I'll also need to think about energy. Without electricity, I'm limited to manual tools and fire. I'll set up a wood stove for cooking and heating. For light, I'll use oil lamps or candles, and I'll start a compost pile. Everything organic goes back into the earth. Waste, nothing. Michigan's climate is a double-edged sword. The growing season is short, 120 to 150 days, depending on the year. Last frost is mid-May, first frost is early October. That's my window. I'll need to start seeds indoors, use cold frames to extend the season, and focus on fast-maturing varieties. Corn needs at least 90 days. Potatoes can handle cooler weather. I'll prioritize crops that can tolerate a light frost: kale, spinach, carrots. Winter is the real challenge. 6 months of frozen ground means 6 months of relying on stored food. I'll need a root cellar for potatoes, carrots, and beets, a smokehouse for meat, and a woodlot, at least 2 acres of fast-growing trees like willow or poplar to keep the stove fed. I'll calculate my firewood needs. 3 cords per winter, minimum. More if the temperatures drop below zero. I'll also need to plan for drought. Michigan's summers can be dry, and if I'm relying on rain alone, I'm setting myself up for failure. I'll set up a drip irrigation system to deliver water directly to the roots of my plants. It's more efficient than overhead watering and reduces the risk of disease. And then there's the wind. Michigan is known for its strong winds, especially in the winter. I'll need to plant windbreaks, rows of evergreen trees or shrubs to protect the crops in the farmhouse. I'll also need to secure anything that could be blown away: loose tools, tarps, even the roof of the farmhouse. If a storm hits, I don't want to be chasing my supplies across the field. Snow is another concern. Heavy snow can collapse roofs, block doors, and make travel impossible. I'll need to keep the paths clear and reinforce the roof of the farmhouse. And I'll need to plan for power outages. Without electricity, I'm limited to manual tools and fire. I'll keep a stockpile of firewood, candles, and blankets. And I'll learn to embrace the cold. It's not going away. This land has potential. The soil is decent, the water is clean, and the location is defensible. But potential isn't enough. I need to quantify it, test the soil, monitor the water, secure the perimeter, and always have an exit plan. I'll start small, a test plot of radishes to confirm the soil is viable, a rain barrel to collect water, a reinforced root cellar for storage. If everything checks out, I'll expand. If not, I'll move on. There's no room for sentiment and survival. I'll also need to keep records. A journal of what I plant, when I plant it, and how it grows. Notes on the weather, the soil, the water. If something goes wrong, I need to know why, and I need to know how to fix it. Survival isn't about hope. It's about data. And right now, the data says, proceed with caution. I take one last look around. The land is quiet, waiting. It doesn't care if I live or die. That's up to me. I pull out my notebook and start making a list. Soil tests, water tests, security upgrades, crop rotations, firewood, tools. The work is just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I've got a chance.